Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Boom Time. I cannot tell you how fantastic it is to be sitting in this chair. My old friend, the mustard-coloured chair, I don't know what you want to call it. My name's Scott Morrison, founder of The Boom. You know that, over the last 12 to 18 months, the world has fundamentally changed. And I've been on this mission with you, watching and joining us and hearing from our wonderful guests, to encourage people to stop thinking about this thing that's called the new normal and waiting for the new normal, because it just doesn't exist. It ain't going to happen. And what I'm really encouraging is for you to think about how you can unblock, unlock and unleash the future that you want to see. And in order to do that, we are inviting some fantastic guests every month who I really think are doing just that. They are creating this future for themselves, but also sharing their wisdom and their knowledge with everybody else and shaping the world and creating that future that we want to see. And tonight is no exception, and we've got an international flavour this evening, because all the way from Canada is someone who I think is incredibly inspiring. In fact, he has written a wonderful book, which I can't speak highly enough about, and you should go and buy immediately. And if you don't want to buy it immediately, you will want to buy it at the end of this conversation, believe you me. And so I want to welcome tonight this incredible, creative, inspirational leader who is Jonas Altman, all the way from Canada. Before we say hello, Jonas, I'm just going to give everybody a quick biog about you, because they always love to know who they are. So you're on camera, so smile and wave and look beautiful. So Jonas is a Canadian-British speaker, writer and entrepreneur on a mission to make the world of work more human. As the founder of an award-winning design practice called Social Fabric, he facilitates culture-defining learning experiences to elevate and grow leaders at the world's oldest organisations. He speaks regularly at conferences, travels the globe, learning about the changing nature of work, and he coaches leaders to step into change. Not only that, he is part of the Innovation and Entrepreneurship faculty at the University of British Columbia's Sauder School of Business, and his chronicles have appeared in The Guardian, Quartz, The Telegraph, Fast Company, and the Sunday Times. And as I said, he's the author of the best-selling book Shapers, Reinvent the Way You Work and Change the Future. And just for the record, for leisure, he enjoys riding the waves, which is far out. This is cool. Brilliant. So, Jonas, welcome to Boom Time. Welcome to, you can see out there, a fairly sunny London. Where are you today? Where are you joining us from today?
I'm in Vancouver, BC. You might be able to see some trees as well behind me. And I have such a fondness for that city. And when we speak, normally, we're both in our home cubicles. So it's actually nice to get some flavor. It looks a little bit like a James Bond background.
Yeah,
so I'm loving it.
It kind of is right in the middle of the city here. It's beautiful. Got double aspect and old church next to us, and it's a beautiful studio here at Fora. And welcome, Jonas. Welcome to Boom Time tonight. I want to jump straight in, and I want to ask you, because we're just talking about the pandemic and the impact it's had. What one thing would you say, as the pandemic helped you reframe or think differently about your life?
Yeah. It has allowed me to reframe how I show compassion. Ooh. And that's both to myself. So speaking to that, I had this post-London hamster wheel, work, live to work. And the lifestyle in Vancouver is exact inverse of that, is work to live. And I was quite resistant to that. So there's a lot of guilt or a voice saying, do more, get more, achieve more. And the pandemic forced, I think, most people in the knowledge economy and other industries to slow the fuck down, pardon my French. I've also showed or have had patience and more compassion for people who have been dealing with what we're going through in ways that are totally different than how I have processed it. Either very fear-based, very, for the right reasons, worried and concerned, or in many ways behavior that is quite puzzling and creates some sort of cognitive dissonance. And so instead of saying how dare you or what are you doing, it's wait a second, you're going through what can be seen as a collective trauma. So compassion for others is the other aspect.
Fantastic. And that's, it's quite, I wanted to pick up on that idea, that theme you sort of said at the beginning about the differences between the London culture and where you are, and the difference obviously between live to work and work to live. And I'm sure lots of people are feeling that right now. I mean, I've been speaking to lots of people thinking about the future of work, and they've sort of said, I'm not so much working at home anymore, I'm kind of living in the office. And so all this language that we throw around about the blend of life, work, office, home, it's all kind of had a bit of a mishmash. And your book, Shapers, it's trying to make some sense of all of that. And actually, clearly written pre-pandemic, though, right? But it's tell us a little bit about what are Shapers to start off with. What is the theme of the book?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the shortest answer to that is Shapers are people who are lit up by their work. So, no doubt, the first time I met you in East London for a coffee many years ago, you have a shimmer about you. You have a twinkle in your eye, and you're energized by your work.
Yeah.
And then, if you want to unpack that, when you don't see, say, your work as a job that you possess that has a sense of security, but you might view your work as a practice, whether it's a creative practice or another sort, that you get an ability to express yourself every day or often, and that you feel you're making a contribution to the world, that you're in your lane doing what you were meant to be doing. So, it's a surfboard shaper is actually a shaper, and that's where the term is co-opted from. But I've given a footnote to democratize that anyone can have work that ignites them and lights fire inside them.
And how did it come about? How did you think about writing the book? What fired you up to be passionately? Because it's not just a book, by the way, is it? I mean, this is your life. This is your passion. This is what you love doing.
Well, thank you. I mean, I hope it's my life. I think it's a work in progress. Yeah, I was miserable. That's the answer. I was exhausted. The World Health Organization has declared that the term burnout is a occupational phenomenon. It's not a medical condition, but what drives us to that as sort of modern age workers is productivity as a value and being busy as a badge of honor. And so I was fully in that. And I think hitting that point of mental and physical exhaustion brought up this question, there's got to be a better way. And in 2013, 2014, someone said, well, if you could do anything, what would you do? And I was like, easy. I'd organize an event around the future of work, and I'd talk about, in effect, advertising models that were moving away from hierarchies and moving more to like Hollywood. So there's a company in East London called Pulse Films that does, technology and media, and they had, 20 employees and 60 contractors, and they had a very cool office, but most of the work they were doing was very much based on a Hollywood model. And so that was the beginning of this conversation of work that was outcome driven as opposed to being present, work that was based on participation and collective power and not on positional or relational hierarchy. And that was like, whoa. And so I was like, okay, I want to do that. And, it's taken a while, but I think I've found a groove.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a bit like, I'm fascinated right now by this world of work. I'm working with several clients at the moment and helping them understand, what does hybrid working mean? And actually when you take away the mechanics of it all, because it's not just about the mechanics and how you do it, but it's about that, like you said earlier, it's about the compassion, it's about empathy. It's actually about understanding what's going on for each individual, what's going on for people, what fires them up, what do they want to do, how do they want to make things work, and then how do you accommodate that and think it through as part of a process. And obviously you travel the world looking at all these businesses and understanding that. But of course, at the moment, you've not been able to travel. But interestingly, you'd have probably traveled and then seen lots of things happening. But not being able to travel at the other end, this world of work just completely changing at a million miles an hour, it's kind of the reverse of how you used to do it. So how have you been keeping involved, engaged, up to date, inspired by what's been going on around you?
So, it's a sort of caveat when people are trying to adopt new perspectives or gain new perspectives. One answer is like, Scott, just, time will heal. Give it some time, whether, it's a morning or something. So time offers a new perspective, but time is felt very differently for a lot of people. Then someone else might say therapy might help, or coaching, or psychedelics. So in some ways, gaining a new perspective was difficult because being someone who loves traveling and a lot of people are wired for novelty, that just stopped. I mean, I haven't been on a plane since January of 2020, so a year and a half. But high contrast conversations like the ones we have, and when I say high contrast, I mean people who are not inside your bubble.
Yeah.
So as some people contracted and they kept having the same neural feedback in the same conversations, it's like Trump sucks, or this is good, or that's bad.
Yeah.
Whatever it might be, you are reinforcing your narratives. And so I made it a practice to daily, if not, a few times a week, speak to brand new people from around the world who normally might be like, well, when you're next in Chile, we'll have a coffee, or when you next are in London, even you and me. I mean, this allowed us to have probably 5 or 6 conversations that you probably wouldn't have had.
Yeah.
So I definitely doubled down on that. The other interesting thing is, obviously reading books and articles, but using that with maybe a different lens. And the lens is when I was writing, I was trying to convert information into knowledge, translate it, synthesize it. Now I read it as like it's like real life. It's like a Netflix show unfolding. Hybrid offices, fuck the office, 4-day work week, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I'm looking at it with wonder and excitement, like discovering new music and not being like, I need to own it. It's mine. This is like, it's cracked the whole thing open. And working from home or remote work or flexible work or location independence is no longer stigmatized. It's how do you do it well?
Yeah, I remember having conversations pre-lockdown with some business I was working with about, and I use the term loosely, flexible working, right? And it was like, nah, we can't do that. We've got to run a business. You need to be in the office. You need to be present. I need to see you. And we've just gone through the biggest experiment ever globally, where we've all done the same thing. We've all had to work from home. We've all had to adapt. And aside from businesses that were truly impacted by the pandemic because of hospitality or whatever else, nothing huge has, just retail and stuff, but there's not been an Enron or there's not been an enormous business that's just folded and collapsed as a result. And therefore, like, one of the biggest myths of working differently and thinking about how we blend our work and our lives has been busted. Like, you can't have flexibility and run a successful business. But still, are you finding there's still pockets of that thinking sitting in business where people are still stubbornly holding on to the old way of working, the business as usual approach? Or are you happily seeing much more flexibility even in quite fixed mindset people?
I mean, the scariest stat before the pandemic was desktop technology outnumbered mobile technology 2-to-1 around the world. Wow. So most offices weren't equipped for Zooming and for giving someone basically a phone or a laptop. That changed overnight. I mean, the university I worked with in 2 weeks moved all their classes online.
Wow.
And the dean was like, this is what's happening. Like, get on the ship or ship or shape out, whatever, ship out.
Ship out.
Luckily, I was just showing up to do my talks, but someone else had to deal with all that bureaucracy. So even like, say, antiquated or somewhat legacy type organizations at huge sizes were forced to. Necessity is a mother of invention became sort of the motto. But yes, the resistance. So if a person has a fixed mindset and they're a manager and they're used to micromanaging, they now have a new opportunity to reframe or reconfigure how they manage, or they start over-engineering with emails and Slack and phone calls, which again, we're back to like a fear-based mode of like not trusting their team to get on with work. So the balance between leading and managing or giving autonomy and sort of commanding and controlling shifted. And some organizations went very loose and were like, you don't have to come back to the office ever. Other organizations are like, you know, in the States are doing like 3 days in the office, 2 days at home, hybrid models. I believe that from the companies I work with, especially in the creative and tech sector, it was sort of like a breath of fresh air for the companies that have been touting this way of working for 20 years to say, you know, welcome, my friends. It's pretty good over here.
Yeah.
For a lot of people who don't have the discipline and who are segmenters and don't like work and life to be blended, it's probably still a big challenge to like homeschool, do the laundry, take care of household duties, and get work done in the same sort of environment. And that's temporary. I mean, it won't be forever, but I think maybe it's a good like cross training.
Well, listen, I mean, we're thinking about like what is this future of work, and it's kind of the hot topic. I don't know if it's ever the right thing to say. What's the future of work? Because it's kind of like that's just one of those kind of glib throwaway statements. But let's just say we're thinking about what does all of this mean? What will our work and our life look like? Because I think they're immutably linked. You know, I don't think you can just say it's work and life and it's all separate. Like it's now this thing, and we need to think about it. And we in Boom Time we always have this thing about unblock, unlock, unleash, because we're going through the operating system. And so in order to get there, in order to get to this thing that people are defining as the future of work, there's invariably blockers. And I'd love to hear from you. And there's a great quote actually that somebody's written. I can't remember the exact name of the person who wrote the quote because I looked them up and I couldn't. But anyway, the quote is, if businesses implemented just a third of what Jonas said, they'd be at a totally different place. Like, you know, you have such incredible advice, but what is blocking people from making these leaps? What are blocking organizations?
Well, the short answer is not being in touch with reality. The longer answer is from Barry Schwartz, who said that, who wrote a book called Why We Work and has studied the purpose and the motivation behind work. And it was premised on Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, and that we would move and be motivated with a carrot and stick. And also Taylorism, which was like, you know, how can we get more efficient and batch work and systematize it so we can get more out of our resources, which are humans as opposed to cattle or machines. And so Barry's hypothesis, which I believe is truth, is that our whole operating system for work from the industrial era is premised on a lie, on a fable, on a myth. And humans, if treated like adults and are set free, will do great work and will flourish. And so it's sort of, there's a little bit of controversy there because we have these beautiful devices in our hands, in many ways due to an industrial model. But as work shifted from working with our hands to tapping on keyboards and out of the factories and into the knowledge economy, we didn't update our systems of working, our behavior. So we're kind of wheeling from that now, and when you say humanize work or rehumanize work, we're talking about injecting some soul and some vulnerability and fallibility and collaboration, which can get messy. And so that's what's happening, and it's basically like a Band-Aid maybe getting ripped off, and it's like, ow! As opposed to what I thought was going to happen is like this murmur, and you and I would be having this conversation in 2024 or in 2028. Be like, finally, like, God, that took a long time.
But I hear you about that the idea of the murmur, because, you know, we've spoken in the past, and you know Sam, my business partner as well, and the work we did in another business, which was all about, again, getting the diversity of thinking into creative ideas and into businesses. And the part of the challenge of that is always the technology that sits behind it, because people are like, yeah, I love the sound of that, but I don't understand the tech. We've seen in the last 12 to 18 months an enormous acceleration. So that murmur that started over here about we need to get more diverse voices around the table and different thinkers to help us shape how we work, and we need to get more technology to be just much better as we are as a group. Those moments have become reality. Like now, we've had to do it over the last 12 months. And we're seeing huge social shift about diversity and inclusion and different voices and people around the world. And we're seeing huge technological shifts. I mean, we were saying earlier, Jordan and I, we used Zoom probably, 18 months ago. Oh, wow, this is a bit novel. But, now Zoom is a verb, right? To Zoom. So it's just interesting, isn't it? Like the world just shifts at a pace. And in the book, you talk about these big pendulum swings, right? About we go from the old way of working and then we shift the pendulum always swinging from the new to the old. Mm. What is how do we help stop that pendulum just going straight the way back to the old way, or just continuing over here and people not catching up and remaining, staying with it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, as the pendulum shifts, it's like leaving a wreck in its wake. People are out of work, systemic unemployment. There's not a lot of quality work in many parts of the world. And then we're moving possibly to more elitism, where people who are pretty comfortable working in this way, in effect, just get better and more acclimated and, become better trained ninjas. There's a woman named Carlota Perez, who's an economist in London, and every 50 years, there's a cycle of innovation, and her belief is that the paradigm shift now is into a new age. And if it is, and you want to call it a golden age, it is a creative destruction and a rebuilding of what was, say, systemic racism or systemic anti-Semitism or the 1%, or whatever the inequality or injustice that lives within the 8 billion people on the planet. Well, we're not at 8 billion, but we will be soon. And I really like that as an optimist, but your point is really well taken, because it's not about this is better or worse. Hierarchy is good. It gets shit done. Flexibility is good because it gets shit done. Pardon my French again. So they kind of find their equilibrium, just like work and life balance. You're on a call with your wife right before we got on, and then boom, switch into Scott boom mode. I guess that's resilience and agility, which is now the skill du jour. Adaptability, flexibility, resiliency, reliability is what people are looking for. And companies who are predicated on it's going to be the same next quarter, we're going to crush it, and we're going to sit in our ivory towers are squandering. So I'm wondering if that's the silver lining here is at the sort of highest scale antitrust lawsuits that would break up big tech, which was going to happen in the States and never really happened because they're just, they're basically eating themselves. And then emerging companies, Lego, that just did LGBTQ Lego set. Patagonia, that's doing, saving our human planet as their mission. And you have like these companies, and then you have a generation coming in, like your kids, who are going to make the choice for their values, for their intuition and their gut. And that's where I think the pendulum shifts, and the prism of being locked in work and work as a toil to get some money to survive or to go to heaven becomes an old story, and that people can rise up and really, flourish and work. That's my hope.
I love that. I mean, I love what you said there, and I also was drawn to that final point about the next generation, because I've been hearing sort of fairly contradictory views, and it's good to get your point on it, which is one of the blockers feels like there's this generation coming through, and they want flexible work, and the big corporates can't keep up with them. I often have quotes from people who work in corporate saying, well, what, Dominic Groundsell, years and years ago when he was working at the RSA, I think, or he was working at maybe it's Travelex at the time, and said, look, why does a young person want to come and work in my business when they can go and work somewhere, with like Google or one of the tech companies, which is, a home of flexibility and, where they want to work and doing their kind of life's work and their life's passion. And then, so I sort of think, okay, that generation, much more flexible, wanting to do all their own thing. And then I hear from some of the businesses I'm working with at the moment that it's the young people who are actually wanting a bit more of coming back into the office and wanting less flexibility, because for them, working at home in a small room with a flat share of 5, they can't do the work they want. And they want to have that connection with senior people. They want the visibility, they want the learning. And so you've got this kind of contradiction in the world of, we believe generation, let's call it Gen Z or whatever they want to, there's this young generation who want to be fancy free and do their life's work. But then when they are kind of doing that, they actually want less of that flexibility and they want to be in the office learning from senior people. And I wonder what your take, because it feels quite contradictory to me.
Yeah. Well, I think we talked about this before, not so much applied to the preference for work, as there's no one size fits all. So someone who works at Google, a Googler, identifies with it, loves it, rides their Segway into the office with their cappuccino, and is living their best life. Someone else is wearing golden handcuffs, and they can't wait to get out of there to start a startup or go for a nonprofit. Someone else can crush it. I have a friend in London who just left his fintech company to do his own thing, and he can't get work done at home with other people. If they're not bothering him, it's just their presence detracts. That's why sometimes coffee shops are such a wonderful place, which is basically a third space or a co-working space of just enough distraction to get work done. So to think that, there's one solution is why we're talking about hybrid models or mixed models of, coming into the office for the co-working movement often, or the Shoreditch House, Soho House, was social and intellectual and collaborative, and actually turning on your computer to do emails or do work and put your headphones on was sort of leave me alone. And you see that in the office, or you used to see that as the indicator of your Beats headphones.
Yeah.
So now that doesn't necessarily exist. You put your Beats headphones on alone in your apartment. No one cares. Your goldfish might say, oh, I guess I'll stop. So I guess for me, what I'm seeing is people struggling because they don't have the discipline or they don't like the isolation. And that's leading to all sorts of, problems, including mental health problems. And other people who are like, holy crap, I'm walking the dog. I'm doing calls on Zoom on my phone. I mean, I coach a guy in North Carolina who's now running for office. He quit his job to go back to his old job, and he's now leading people because Zoom has, in effect, given him the flexibility that he always craved to free up time to do the things of having a chance to serve his community. And it was an amazing transformation. And he's also saying he's more present with his kid, because when he was with his kids before, he always had the devices screaming at him, metaphorically, look at me, there's work to do. He's also just finished his MBA. And now when he's with his kids and they're having a pillow fight, he's like, screw it. They're up too late. I'll wake up a little bit late tomorrow. I'll be tired. It's a total shift in the personal operating system that different people deal with differently. So I don't think that there's necessarily the answer, but having choice, and not too much choice, but enough choice to say, co-working space, fora, your home kitchen or home office, public coffee shop, or even co-working when you go to your client's office and work on site for a day or two and watch the behavior, feel the vibe.
I love that. And we're starting to think about unlocking here, because we've talked about some of the blockers and things that might get in the way. And I want to understand how people can kind of unlock the inspiration or unlock the thinking or unlock some new ways forward. And in the book, you clearly made the point there. It's not one size fits everyone, and there is no silver bullet at all. But there's one bit in the book where you talk about the 3 C's of control, context, collaboration as a way to kind of work around this idea that everyone thinks there's one way of doing it. So what are the kind of filters that you can put through? Can you share? I was really intrigued in the book when I read that bit and how it helped people think about things in a different way. Can you just share it with us? Because I think it's interesting to share and explore.
Sure. There's studies that show that the biggest indicator of motivation in work is making progress. And you're like, no shit. It's called the progress principle, which in many ways is why people sometimes who work in organizations that are 100,000, several 100,000 struggle because they don't see the dent they're making. Whereas a 20-person startup or a nonprofit, it's like every day you kind of feel and believe. So the first element is control. Do you have control over where you work, when you work, and how you work? And if you do, boom, you're engaged, generally. The second one is about context. And context, when we were talking, I was thinking about this. So context can be seen as both the culture, which is what the company says are their values, and what they believe is, we're fun and playful. And it's also the climate, which is what people experience every day, which sometimes mismatches. So you might feel like the culture is not being lived and someone else is like, no, wait, it is. Great example, in Vancouver, there's a company called Lululemon, and it's very much like Marmite. Some people think it's like heaven on earth, and other people is like avoid it like the plague. I mean, I probably get in trouble for that. But anyway, not anymore. That's how it was back in the day. They've done a great job. And also what works in LA won't work in London. What works in Vancouver won't work in Vienna. And even what works on the 22nd floor in Manhattan won't work on the third floor of the same company. Yeah. Accounting, legal department. So that's context. And if you take into consideration context, you're not doing a control paste, copy and paste job. You're actually sensing and responding what's needed within that subculture, within that ecosystem. And then collaboration, obviously you and I are fans of that. Yeah. At scale is difficult. And when we look at collaboration, we're often looking at what we spoke about before. Participatory, transparent, inclusive ways of making decisions, gathering in information, processing it, and resharing is great as a value judgment. I'm the boss, do it my way or no way is an old way, which rubs people the wrong way. And there's a tension there. And so collaboration should have abrasion and conflict, but healthy. Yeah. And you had alluded to that. Cognitive diversity, different worldviews, different backgrounds. That's good business. It's like Harvard Business Review has it on the cover of their magazine. Diversity is good business. It's not a smoke and mirrors. So that's back to collaboration is a superpower.
It's great, that point as well. I work with a group called the Forward Institute, and we work with leaders. And one of the professors on the faculty often says that what we tend to do when we collaborate and we get into this world, we get into the culture of a business and everything else, is we look for the similarities, because everyone wants to assimilate to the norm, and everyone wants to be part of something. And it's very interesting if you can shift that mindset. Instead of looking at the similarities, look at the differences. Where are you different? And I don't mean that physical, but when you're having conversations, this healthy tension, where are the differences of opinion? Where are the differences in perspectives? Where are the differences in point of views? Because interestingly, when you start to throw those into the mix, somewhere along the way, you find that actually the passion that you have for this and the passion somebody else has for this, there's a little paper-thin line between the two ideologies. And actually you can ignore the ideology for a minute or two, but you can find you've got a real passion for something that if you combine that passion and collaborate on that level, that will create something really, really powerful. I really love that thinking of, how do you celebrate differences in all of this? Because there are going to be so many different ways of thinking about how we work and how we live. And you didn't know 6 months ago that Daisy, who works in the creative team, has 2 kids and a dog, and works in the kitchen and has to do this and that. And you do know that now. And, there's that kind of tension as well of, all right, God, I can't believe I was so hard on her, or I didn't think she was that. And now I know more about her life. We know much more about each other in this kind of sense, that I think we can go a level deeper, like to your original point about compassion. I think compassion comes into this.
It's funny, as you're speaking, there's like so many things. I had like the Pixar brain trust doing the end of the movie, and they like rip it up and they start again. Yeah. And then I have this analogy of coffee, no coffee is better than bad coffee. So no collaboration is better than bad collaboration. But what really landed for me was when I lived in London and I was working with setting up an incubator at the university, I didn't want anyone to know like what Daisy had about the cat or the kid. I didn't go to the pub very often. If I did, I had one drink and I was out. And I was like, I don't want to mix personal and professional. And I feel like now when I look back on that, it's a bit of a missed opportunity to let people know who I really was. And that now, even when you read my intro and you're like, I like riding waves. I mean, that's the only thing that really matters to me in that whole spiel that you did. Like, it's not, all the other stuff is all optics, right? So now that we have that, it's uncomfortable for some people. They don't want to know. I got enough baggage at home. Now my coworkers are telling me they've got, a case of the blues.
Yeah.
But this is what it is to be human. So if you don't want to know, then don't ask or filter it and, make it gone. But if someone actually is not up to it, like just a phone call you had with your wife, now I can be sensitive to this and you could say, can we reschedule?
Yeah.
And instead of me being like judging you or saying like, did I do something to offend you? I now have more of a picture, which is healthy because I don't need to agree. It's not about agreeing. It's like you said, there's a meeting point that we're passionate about politics. That's
yeah,
important.
exactly. That's the thing about, that's the beauty of difference. It's like you could be on the left wing or the right wing, but you have a passion for politics. And actually, when you look at, you've got a passion, both of you have got a passion for economics and how a country runs. And so let's talk about economic models and think about that, and that's just in a kind of in a day-to-day life. But imagine if you had that kind of tension creatively or, in thought leadership in an organization. That's powerful.
If we didn't have a passion for the way we work, for music, for London culture, and for collaboration at scale, you and I would be like, hey, bruv, and we'd have nothing to say. What's happening is like, it's like you can go like, we go like, UK drum and bass, and the next thing you know, 10 minutes have gone. I'm like, I got to walk the dog. These are the moments that actually create safe spaces. Yeah. They create psychologically safe spaces. Then people can be like, you know what? I've been thinking about this thing. But before they were worried about being judged or being laughed out of the room. And I think back to your thing about the next generation, they want the ability to have a voice and to make a contribution. And that's the environments they're looking for, whatever they look like.
Yeah.
Ivory tower, it could be, I was thinking about Apple's office. It's like a starship oval. But really, it's just green space. It's like 80% forest.
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, you want to go for like a walk? We were talking about that. It's like, sure, that's work.
Yeah.
Like having the walk and talk meeting is maybe a third of their day.
Crazy. In that, it's a great point about Apple. I hadn't actually thought of that, but I do love that idea of walk and talk.
I was just thinking, like, is anyone going to their office? I'm like, I'm sure they are. Yeah. It's like,
Yeah. I was just thinking, like, who's doing it well? I mean, you're always learning. I mean, and this is your passion. You're always learning. Who's doing it well? Who inspires you in this world when you think about what the future of work could look like?
I mean, on the geekiest side is the Inspiral Network, which they wrote a book called Better Work Together. And they were pioneering a new model of stakeholder capitalism. Wow. Employees, partners, clients, neighbors, the community. And so you look at consent, instead of shareholder capitalism, it's the board members and the people of stocks. So Inspiral Network is a model, and I recommend, you can download their book for like, $10 or something.
Right, we'll check.
And then all the way through to Chobani Yogurt, which is the largest yogurt manufacturer in America. The owner came in one day and said, everyone is now a owner in the company.
Wow.
He took, 10% of his shares and divested them. There's that fellow who decided that he was going to take a pay cut from $1 million something to, his name's Dan, to $70K, and everyone thought it was a PR stunt. People had more babies. They started to flourish. They bought property. Their mental health went up, and it worked, and his company's now just crushing it. So we've got these models of behaving with compassion and with care as a leader, and it cascading. And then there's this crazy company in China called Hair, which is a fridge manufacturer. They're not a barber salon. And they're on like their fifth or sixth iteration of their organizational structure. So their previous one was a bunch of like enterprises or mini startups operating as part of one ecosystem. Probably like what Amazon might do when they go to develop Alexa or something like that. And the idea, and they've evolved it since then, is that everyone is treated as an entrepreneur. So you're not even thinking about entrepreneur.
Yeah, yeah.
And Innocent Drinks in the UK, you probably know, did that as well. And they just keep investing in their employees who leave and say, well, what are you going to do? And I'm going to do some mints. Okay, here's a couple of million. Go and... So I think that those are all on the fringe, but they're really good blueprints. And they're models that you can care for humans, you can care for technology, and you can care for the planet and do it in a way that is symbiotic.
I mean, you've just completely unlocked something for me, and I'm sure for people watching and listening, which is when we're talking about this thing called the future of work, right? Lots of the conversations end up about, well, are we going to be in the office? Are we going to be doing a hybrid model? Are we going to be... And it kind of misses the point from what you were just saying there, because actually, what you were saying there, it made me think, it's not just... That's just a kind of a component of it all, right? You know, the real opportunity is, how do you structure your business in a new way if you can? How do you reframe your employee engagement? How do you your pay structure, your opportunities for your employees? You're looking at the whole thing, not just going, well, we'll come in the office 3 days a week, 2 days that you can have 2 days at home, and everyone's going, oh God, I've got to work out all this. So, no, hang on. There's a much bigger opportunity here.
Yeah.
And I wonder how many people are really thinking of it in that scale, aside from the companies that you just mentioned and the new models, and thinking about, well, yeah, what happens if we just democratized everything and then gave everybody a share in the company, and this and that and that, and this became the future of business and how we work, not just let's just give everyone a laptop and say you can work 2 days from home. I wonder how many people are thinking in that scale that you just explained there, Jonas.
Well, I know people whose whole company thinks at that scale, and they are not management consultants. They're considered, partners in crime as organizational designers. And the trouble or the difficulty, and I've had sort of provocations, are like, do we start with the human operating system and try to change mindsets and behavior and get to the heart of the matter? And do we take technology and try to wrap it so that people fall into line? Or do we go right to sort of the systemic level and just reorganize how we work, like there's no more office, or now you don't have a boss, or now you set your own salary, which in many ways is also tied to behavior, but it's policy and mandates. And so different people have different opinions. My belief currently is if you unlock the individual at the unit of one, that they come in and their way, the frequency, the relational energy between them and their immediate colleagues switches. It's just like a relationship in domestic life. You want to change the output or change the outcome, you change yourself.
Yeah.
And I think Esther Perel is going into companies and taking 30 years of marriage counseling to CEOs and CMOs and CSOs. So that to me is very powerful. Not to say that technology and the way you organize is not, but I think that that's a great place to start, or at least for my life, where I like to make an impact, is looking at the human element and having that challenge the status quo.
There's something in the book as well. Could you just put that question up again, Dan, that was on the screen for us? Because there's something in the book that I picked up, which I love, which is the best place to work isn't a place, it's a state of mind. Which I really love, because I think, how do we help people unlock that state of mind? And then Emma Willars, who's one of our viewers tonight, she's made a great comment. She's actually said, like, younger generations are stuck with the office model for presence and profile, as perhaps the influential players are stuck in that office model. So I think what she's saying there is the reason that the younger gens are wanting to come in the office and do that is because that's how the model is. Well, they've got to do it because that's how they're it's how it's going to progress for them. But what you're saying is the best place to work isn't a place; it's a state of mind. And so how do we help people shift that? Actually, look, it's not about the office; it's about this state of mind. How do we help people unlock that?
Yeah.
That will help the next generation.
I'm a dreamer, and if you go back into the Renaissance or even into ancient Greece, people who've been thinking about the good life have not been thinking about offices, like these big industrial complexes. And in many ways, as the advertising industrial complex collapses and the religious industrial complex collapses, the office industrial complex, personified by WeWork, has crumbled much sooner than I thought. And it's being rebuilt. And what it's being rebuilt in effect, Fora, a place that people want to travel to on a train with sweaty armpits to hang out, to collaborate, and in many ways the eudaimonia machine that I had a picture of in the book is Cal Newport's deep work theory of like when you get to the chamber, that's the Dr. Dre beats. That's the flow state. But to get there, you got to go through the salon, the library, the blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And I think that the state of mind was a provocation. And I was thinking that you already were talking about it before, is that when we move to the best creative thinkers do their work when they're not working, Nishi wrote most of his books walking 8 hours a day. He wrote them in his mind. He stopped and scribbled. And then when he got to actually home, the book was already written and he was just barfing it out onto the paper. This is like historically true for creative work. So if we're talking about expressing yourself and finding something novel, whether it's poetry or film, but if it's actually SEO, data analytics, and you've got like 5 screens, maybe the office is the right place to do that for 4 hours. So you go in at 8 and you talk to your teammates, and then you jump in and you fry your brain, and then you head off to Hyde Park. I don't know, but it's still a state of mind, because the state of mind is where do I need to be to do great work? We're back to where you work, when you work, and how you work.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I speak to, back to Emma's point a little bit as well, I speak to businesses quite a lot about what I call the value exchange. It's like, at the moment, the value exchange is pretty much loaded, or was 18 months ago before, was very much loaded in favor of business. It's like you come in here, you do 9 to 5, and, you are here. And it might even be longer, and you won't get paid anymore and everything else. And the value back to you was your salary or, whatever else. So you might got a bit of learning. But actually, smart businesses are now thinking about this in a very different way. And smart employees are either thinking about it a different way, which is, look, like you're saying, like I'm a data analyst, right? I've got 5 screens. I only work really well for 4 hours. And actually, in those 4 hours, I churn out twice as many insights as I would if you made me work for 8 hours. So here's the deal. I come in for 4 hours and do this. I'm going to go home for 2 hours and I want to do this, and I take the rest of the time is mine. But you're going to get your work out of me and some if you allow me to work in this way. And I think the more of those kind of conversations people start to have, the more we're going to shape, to Emma's point, like the office is not your prison, kingdom, whatever. It is a place to do something that you need to do. But the office is effectively anything, because it's, my office is like you say, my office is walking up the road in my head,
I want to talk to Emma at some point. So Emma, let's talk. But I actually want to use a person that personifies Emma that I interviewed when I was writing the book, because I knew she worked at a distributed company. So let's use WordPress for an example. Her company was actually Buffer. Yeah. WordPress had an office, didn't have an office, got rid of the office, and they were hiring engineers rapidly as the pandemic hit and hiring them remotely. So, come on Zoom. Scott, you look like a nice guy. And, you're probably just 2D, and then you turn around and you're just a piece of paper. But you're coding and you have the capability. Now, do you want to hire someone for their competency? Sure. But you want to hire for their trustworthiness more so than their capability. You want both of those. And so this woman graduated from university with like media and comms, amazing social media strategist, got a couple of job offers in San Francisco, and in her mind, she's like, I'm moving to Bogota. I don't know about you, but I can do my work anywhere with a Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
And this is 7 years ago. So say like 2013. She turned down, right out of college, fancy salaries, moved to Bogota, landed 2 or 3 clients, became obsessed with Buffer because Buffer, very much open Buffer online shows you like their salaries, and it's very transparent. And she got a job there after Bogota, and then they're like, well, we don't have an office. So she's never had an office since she graduated. And I was like, you represent that quote, like the office is a state of mind.
Fantastic. That's great. I love that. I really, there's so much we can learn. And that's what I mean. I mean, I think that people need to be thinking about, when you're thinking about unlocking inspiration for all of this stuff, don't think in that kind of microcosm of, well, it's all about office, home, 3 hours. It's think about the broader impact that you could really create. Think about all the different questions that you need to ask and start to generate and work on, and think about things in a different way. So we've got about 15 minutes left. It's the weather in Canada obviously impacting the output shortly, but don't worry. Jonas will be back with us in a second. If you've got any questions, by the way, like Emma has, please drop them in the chat box and we'll ask those questions to Jonas, because we're going to move on to the final bit, which is, of course, unleashing. And how do we get to action? How do we create things? And Jonas, I mean, you've got so many plaudits for the book, but I mean, I think it's beautifully written, and I wouldn't say that just as we're friends, because I give you the feedback, but it is beautifully written.
You got something in your tooth.
And one of Edward Vince says, an invigorating look at the changing nature of work and how to thrive in the future. And Edward's the creative director at Airbnb. And when you've got companies like that and people like that saying such great things, I want to understand, what does it take in your experience to unleash action when it comes to making these kind of changes, when it comes to putting your vision of the future of work into place? And through the work that you do, Social Fabric, the work that you've done with your coaching and your programs and everything else, what does it take to get people to make that step, and what's the kind of action that they can create that will start to create the impact that they want to see?
Well, you and I've got that running joke of who wants change, who wants to lead it. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
So you have to have a will.
Yeah.
It's a lot of like learning. Learning, typically you want the willpower / discipline. You want to be able to directly apply it to your lived experience. So, you can learn stuff in university and then it's like in one ear, out the other. But as soon as you teach it or as soon as you implement it, it becomes tacit knowledge. So there's a little bit of a willingness to fail your way to success or experiment. Yeah. And, Spain is doing that right now as they move to a 4-day work week at scale. It'll be the largest experiment, much like UBI has been trialed around the world. So the willingness to dance with the new, which is what COVID has really taught a lot of people. It was like, how do I get okay in the liminal space between what was and what will be, and be sitting with it? Rumi, the poet, would say, like, the cure for the pain is in the pain. Yeah. Like, and you and I mean, part of how we show up in the world is never, since your X days, like, EX is working outside of the organization in order to bring a world view or a wider lens for them to pull what's relevant for their climate, for their culture. So that's another thing, is to say what works for Stussy is not going to work for Carhartt, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, yeah. And then I'm really a huge fan of everyone is naturally creative, resourceful, and whole, which is I just hold up the book, which is a wonderful quote from Coactive Coaching, yeah, which I've been training for the last few years, which flips the model of consultancy. Of instead of I hold the expertise like a machine that has data that outputs it, which is great. Amazon might have some data saying our users are females under the age of 30, and then boom, you just retarget, and next thing you know, you're exploding. Great. In the absence of data, you can move to tenure. How long have you been around? Well, you've been at that ad agency for 30 years. go to Scott, you're holding that wisdom. But there's also the Emma and the buffer generation who are younger, who have more objectivity. They're bringing their new lens of beginners. So instead of being like, you don't know anything, you're like, that's your superpower.
Yeah.
You're coming at this as just a layperson. And so I think that leadership style that we're seeing is more embodied, it's more vulnerable, it's actually got more female energy, more emotional intelligence, and better interpersonal skills. So if you mix that, then you're actually getting more in touch with reality, which is there is a shift, but if you're too far ahead, you're in the future. And if you're too much of a laggard and too nascent, you're missing the opportunity. And so that's a lot of the work that you and I do is often showing up as a facilitator, as a coach, as a motivator, as a learner, and being like, what can we learn? And that ability to switch between these different hats isn't historically how leaders showed up. They were like, you're the boss, you make decisions, people follow.
Yeah, I want to talk about coaching, because this is one of the things that I'm talking in a few weeks actually about leadership and the power of coaching in all of it. Because we quite often have this kind of superhero leadership. I was thinking in the pandemic, there were sort of three moments in the pandemic. You know, in the very beginning, it was kind of very Churchillian, and everyone was like, we'll get through this. And then there was this kind of, and it was all about fight, flight, and freeze. You know, and at first it was all about fight. You know, right, well, we're gonna get through this. And then in the second part of the lockdown, it became kind of like flight. Like everyone, you know, we got a small window, and everyone was like, I want to go on holiday, I want to do this, and I want to get out of here. And then this just the last part of the pandemic and the lockdown. This is pretty UK specific, but there's been a lot of freeze. You know, there's been a lot of even now, when we think about the future of work, there's still a lot of freeze, because people are like, oh, I don't know what to do, and they're thinking about, is it 3 days, you know, all that sort of stuff we've been talking about. And I think there's something in this power of coaching, which is incredible, which unlocks that freeze and helps you unleash action, because it's about, like you're saying, I'd like to hear more about the co-act. Was it called co-act?
Yes, it's called coactive.
Coactive.
I mean, there's tons of coaching things out there, and you can go on Instagram right now and call yourself a life coach.
Yeah.
And I will believe it, because I've spoken to you. But the beauty in it is it changes the weight from, if consulting is putting a lot of weight on the expert to have the solutions to someone else's problems. Okay, if you're an engineer, mathematician, ad man, ad woman, maybe you do. The facilitator, which is where I think you show up a lot, is facilitating a process or facilitating change within. And then coaching is all about the coachee. It's all about their story, all about unlocking what's inside of them. Whether it's like, I really don't want to be in this job, or I really do want to be in this job, but my God, does it suck right now. Like, there's no office, my boss is an asshole, blah, blah, blah. And so the coach approach, even from a leadership point of view, is the connector. It is the shaper. It is the collaborator. And it shows up in this modality, which is a partner. That's why it's called coactive. And my friends who got me involved in it, I mean, there's some of the people who are solving the problems for these organizations at a systems level, at organizational design firms in New York, Toronto, LA, are trained coaches.
Right. Not
to say I'm a coach, but to know that they can move into that and be like, tell me more about that.
Yeah.
Or how does that make you feel? And you're like, what? How does that make me feel? I'm pissed. I want to punch you. And it's like, okay, good. And then you do process coaching of like, let's let that out.
Yeah.
And then you get that anger out in a container, and then they go, fuck, I was really mad at that person. Okay, now how do you want to show up? How do you want to respond?
Yeah.
And so when I found coaching, I have a coach who happens to really poke me. The best coaching sessions are the most frustrating ones, where I come away with a bit of dis-ease, a bit of annoyance, a bit of resentment, and then I investigate why that is because they're unlocking the parts of myself that are holding me back.
Wonderful. And that's what great coaches do. And
yeah.
how are you, how can businesses, I mean, how are you helping businesses unleash action, Jonas? What are you doing? What's your business? What's your role? How are you helping that?
Well, I was gonna make a comment that, you know, we've been sort of bashing hierarchy and like and the bosses. But you and I both showed up with black T-shirts today, which you can see.
Of course.
And I got on a call yesterday with a friend in London, actually a friend in Tel Aviv who has a startup, and we were both wearing plaid. We present ourselves in everyday life as someone, whether we like it or not. I mean, you and I, we're bearded men. So I show up as Jonas Altman, like that's my website, and I've been never 100% wanting to say I'm a design strategist, I'm a coach, I'm a this. How I show up is to help make work more human and at the individual level to unlock the potential in people, which is how many people choose to show up who choose coaching. So if they go to jonasaltman.com, it sort of sends you off the social fabric. It sends you off to Shapers to look at the program, which is a coaching program for 8 weeks as a sprint, also the book, and some podcasts. I'll probably put this up there so people can listen. So jonasaltman.com, they can find me. And I'm really interested in working with people who are ready to step into change, which is like, how do we start this? It's like the desire needs to be like burning inside.
Fantastic. Listen, we're pretty much out of time. And we could probably carry on speaking.
I'm not letting it go.
We could go, but we could speak. I know we can speak for a long time. And we will continue to speak, obviously, outside us. But I want to say a massive thank you for coming on the show this evening, this morning. Emma's sent some lovely comments from people who've been listening and watching us tonight. Listen, it's always inspirational to hear what you have to say, Jonas. And, I think right now, like we're saying, I can't echo more than what I believe, which is in order to make those changes, to create that future that you want to see, it's like we say, you've got to step into that change. And there is that classic cartoon, who wants change? Me. Who wants to lead the change? No. Hopefully from today's session, when you're thinking about the future of work and you're thinking about how you can make a fundamental change to your business, how you can unblock, unlock and unleash that impact and the future that you want to see in this crazy world, but the future of work. Listen back to these brilliant pearls of wisdom from Jonas and the stuff that he's talked about today. Go and buy the book. It is an incredible book. It really is genuinely incredible read. It has so many fantastic endorsements to it. And just sign up and listen to what Jonas has to say. There's loads of great resources on his sites. Thank you all. We love having you here every month in the beautiful surroundings of Fora. And of course, as we move out of lockdown, we're going to be doing many more literally live in this room, in this chair with our guests. We've got loads of great guests coming up, exactly like Jonas, and there'll be more coming out. We'll be sharing with you very, very soon. Once again, thank you to Jonas Altman for all the way from Canada, live. And until next month, when we see you again, please stay boom.
Thank you, Scott.